This is the Roots and All podcast, and I'm your host, Sarah Wilson. Join me as I talk about all aspects of gardening with some of the top horticulturists from around the world. Today, we're heading north to Scotland to explore the surprising power of wild edibles. I'm joined by Wendy Russell and Freda Farquharson from the Cerddwr Institute at the University of Aberdeen, who are rethinking how we use our landscapes and our food systems. From sorrel seeds and citizen science to health, biodiversity and climate-friendly farming, we dig into how wild foods could play a vital role in a more resilient future for people, for nature and for the land itself.
I'm Wendy Russell. Obviously, I work at the University of Aberdeen Cerddwr Institute. I was originally a chemist by training, so I studied at the University of Bristol and I studied chemistry, and that led to natural product chemistry, which gave me a real interest in what's actually in plants. And then, that followed on really, how do things in plants really protect us from non-communicable diseases like type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease? So that's where my interest came from, and I've kind of driven my career around that. So I still work on looking at how our diet impacts on disease, but I'm really interested in sustainable agriculture and how we might produce food that changes the diet that we have in a way that makes it easy for people to make the right choices. And that led to me being interested in wild foods because, we did a lot of studies and we found out that wild foods and wild relatives of our everyday vegetables are really high in compounds that we think prevent non-communicable diseases.
How about you, Freda? What's your background?
Right, so my name is Freda Farquharson and I work at the Aberdeen University as well and the Cerddwr Institute. So I'm a research assistant and I've worked at the Cerddwr for 36 years now, starting here straight from school. So the majority of my time at the Cerddwr has actually been spent in microbiology, first of all ruminant microbiology, then moving into human gut work, and a recent move into the microbiome, food innovation and food security theme with Wendy Russell in 2024 made a huge shift in the work I was doing, and I had a steep learning curve to learn all about wild foods, phytochemicals, and it's really quite exciting so to actually be part of Wendy's group at the Cerddwr, and I'm building up a huge knowledge, and I've got lots of enthusiasm, and I feel quite lucky to be employed in a project where it's involved foraging in the beautiful countryside up here in the northeast of Scotland.
I didn't actually kind of note this question down, but it's really interesting what you said about the impact of wild edibles on non-communicable diseases. Could you just expand on that a little bit? Because I didn't actually realise that.
Yeah, so obviously our diet, there's lots of things in our diet that are really important, things like fibre and protein and micronutrient, vitamins and minerals. But plant-based foods also contain thousands of phytochemicals. Now, we don't have a lot of evidence about the role of phytochemicals in our diet, but they're not very different from a lot of the vitamins. To me, they're like undiscovered vitamins. And we know that plant-based foods really impact on our health. And wild edibles and wild relatives are much higher in phytochemicals because they haven't been intensively bred in a way that a lot of our modern vegetables have to be profitable and productive. So they have these chemicals to help them fend off pests and, signaling molecules within the plant. So we ran a study where we looked at wild relatives of common veg alongside their F1 hybrids, which is the things you'll find in the supermarkets, and also heritage varieties, which are a couple of 100 years old. And we grew them at different locations around Scotland. And we found out that the phytochemicals were much higher in the wild relatives. So, we would assume that would make them a more healthy component of the diet. They're also very nutrient dense, so a small amount of them in your diet could really supplement what you currently eat.
Yeah, I was going to say, do we need to be consuming a lot of them? Because I'm jumping ahead here, but you're using sorrel for your project. But I was thinking, what's a handful of sorrel leaves? What difference is that going to make to you in terms of health benefits?
So what we would really like people to do is really diversify their diet, have a lot of different sources of plant-based foods. And, there's a lot of authors out there with books on eat more plants. But, the scientific evidence is that if you have a really diverse diet, it's much more healthy. So diversifying it with common vegetables and fruits is fantastic. But if we could add in a small amount of some of these wild relatives, it would add to that diversity. You've got more chance of getting different vitamins and minerals and different phytochemicals. So we would like to see a possibility where, these sort of things could be more mainstream. And we're really interested in because they're wild, they don't need the nutrient inputs that a lot of our modern farmed vegetables do, so they can grow without fertilizer and pesticides. So in the right type of farming systems, they could really prosper. So they could be economically viable to grow, and also really healthy to consume.
So with that in mind, what is the Wild Edibles project encouraging people to do?
So it's a really broad project. It's really about how Scotland uses its underutilised lands. I don't know if you know much about agriculture in Scotland, but only around 10% of our land is for arable farming. The rest is mostly wild, and at the moment it's mostly cattle and sheep that graze on it. The Scottish Government want to reforest, so they want to get more trees into Scotland. They also want to protect our peat bogs, so we have big rewilding initiatives. But it's important that we have a really valuable food system at the same time. So the project's really about how Scotland uses those underutilised lands, and should we be thinking about agroforestry, where we can maybe produce some of these wild foods. So it's not just about engaging with the public, it's also about engaging with policy teams and stakeholders like Nature Scotland, and having that conversation to see exactly what Scotland wants its food system to look like.
And so if people are interested in the project, how are they getting involved?
So I'll let Freda answer that. She can tell you a bit about how we do the public engagement, and that's through the Citizen Science Project.
Yes, so we first started to plan this citizen science project, must have been 2024, when we met up with a panel of experts in the food and forestry and agricultural organisations in Scotland. And we wanted to chat with them to see what wild edible would be suitable for rolling out this programme. So there was a few ideas kind of mentioned, but sorrel was the one that we thought would be quite amenable to novice or participants who had no experience of wild food to be willing to actually grow it. So that was in 2024. And then at the start of last year, we made a start in actually planning out the project and how it would actually operate in practice. And we had to think about, it was obviously social media had to be involved in the way that we recruited and we actually communicated with our participants. We settled on one particular social media platform for practical reasons. And then we had lots of help from our knowledge exchange team here, Joe and Michelle, who actually assisted in setting up the social media platform and the website, which is active still. We then launched in May 2025 when we had everything in place. The name of the project, of course, all the artwork and the branding, the GDPR, and then we launched in May 2025, and that was when we started to send out the packets of sorrel seeds. There was 50 seeds in each packet, so we were hoping that we had a real healthy crops that our participants could then hopefully use and eat.
And did you have any particular specifications about how they should sow the seeds, or, should they sow them in the field or start them off indoors, or were there any conditions on growing them, or was it just handing over these packets of seeds and saying, okay, there you go, grow these?
So We did want them to use whichever location they had access to, so it was open for everyone, novices and even professionals. Just they could grow it on a window box, in a pot, they could grow it wild if they wanted in their allotment. So hoping to try to recruit as wide-ranging participants as we could. The only one requirement that was actually placed was they wouldn't use any sort of fertilizer because we wanted them to just grow like they were. And we've had varied successes on where the seeds have been sown. So this all adds to the kind of wider picture.
And what are you monitoring? Is it things like germination rate? Is it more technical growing stuff? Or are you monitoring what people actually do with the sorrel once it's grown?
It's actually all of those things. It's on an informal basis through the social media platform. We're asking how they're growing. And yes, we would like it if they let us know the germination rate and what medium they're actually growing the seeds on, whether it's compost, if it's in the earth, if it's in a pot. So that will allow us to just have an idea of how well it is actually growing. So that's in terms of how they grow. And yes, we are wanting information from them as to what they use it for and actually whether or not they use it. Because, there's obviously some hesitancy about, it's not from a supermarket, it's not from a shop, you're growing your own produce, and hopefully they're happy enough. It's proving that, yes, thankfully, people are happy to use it, and they've actually been sharing photographs of the things that they've made. Some of the examples, there's sorrel sauce, there's a sorrel feta cheese and shallot quiche. There's several salads, and there's a sorrel and mushroom omelette, sorrel soup. There's a wide range of recipes that participants have actually sent us in. And we're hoping ultimately to make a recipe booklet, I hope.
Yeah, that's a fantastic idea. Love that. So apart from the recipe booklet, obviously you're collecting feedback. Once the project finishes, what will you then do with that information?
Wendy will actually be reporting our findings in a report to Scottish Government. So maybe Wendy could expand a little bit on the reporting side of things.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. So we are also collecting information on what people think of the concept of wild foods in Scotland. As we've had the social platform running, we've been discussing topics around the benefits of wild food for nature, for climate, for health. And, we're hoping that people will feed back on ultimately how they feel about them being included in our food system. And once we have that information, it'll help us finalise our report, which will talk about the benefits that these plants could have in Scotland and give us some idea of public opinion, because we want to engage everyone in this conversation. I think, if we change the way we farm in Scotland and our food system, everyone should have a role and a voice in that conversation. So it's really been a way of engaging with the public and getting some feedback on the concept. So yeah, we will report all of those findings back to the Scottish Government, and hopefully it'll feed into some of their plans for land use and sustainable agriculture.
So you talked about growing things in the marginal lands in Scotland. I wondered if maybe you could explain a little bit more about those. I'm guessing they're land that's already excluded from existing agricultural operations, and also from, as you said, things that are being done to conserve biodiversity and improve it. And I was wondering what these marginal lands are currently used for, and if it's viable to grow on them, for one thing, and for the second thing, should we be growing on them? I'm presuming that they don't have a lot of value in terms of either people use or biodiversity use.
I guess there's a whole range of less favourable land. I mean, we would not want to change our beautiful vistas in Scotland, and we need to protect flora and fauna across Scotland. So there are certainly areas that you wouldn't want to use in agroforestry. But, if we're encouraging people to put more trees on farms and we're encouraging wider reforestation, then there are perhaps areas where a lot of these crops could be included just to give some economic value to that land, other than obviously the benefits to nature. I'm talking about things like wild garlic. Wild garlic grows really well in the forests and doesn't impact on the biodiversity. And if we had a sustainable way of harvesting that would be, a good economic value for farmers and landowners. And I don't know if you know, but in Sainsbury's, you can buy a bag of wild garlic in their freezer section for £4, a tiny bag for £4.
I did not know that, no.
Yeah, so these products are desirable. And, it's not just wild garlic. Nettles are one of the products we found to be the highest in micronutrients. And they grow all around the perimeters of most farms. And, farmers are really keen to explore regenerative farming methods, and perhaps a lot of these crops could add value to those regenerative farms. So, we're not saying we should, cover all of our wildlands with edible foods and farming systems. It's about the right plant in the right place and understanding how it impacts on biodiversity. We know that a really diverse farming system will have a much higher benefit to off-farm biodiversity. So surely bringing a lot of different wild relatives into farming systems would impact not just on people's health because they become consuming something that's really healthy, and on nature because it would have that off-farm biodiversity benefits, but also not using so much pesticides and fertilizers and being able to farm in a way that lowers our emissions. All of those things are benefits. So it's really about just getting the right farming system in the right place.
I hope I'm right in saying your remit is to prove that there is a desire for this kind of thing and people can be encouraged to be interested in it. Once it gets to the point of actually rolling this out into the landscape, is that where your involvement would stop?
Hopefully not, because this is just one of many projects we do at the Rowett. We work a lot with farmers and we work a lot with food processors. We want to see even the current crops that we grow more healthy and more sustainable. We have a huge project helping to decarbonise the livestock sector by swapping over from imported soya to a homegrown protein solution like hemp. We work with food processors to reformulate their products to make them more healthy, but also to try and help them reduce their Scope 3 emissions. So we will not stop once these products are in the field or in the forests. We will work with people to get the highest economic value for those products and to make sure the way they're farmed and the way they're processed really benefits our climate and nature.
I mean, I have to say, it sounds like you're doing incredible work and I'm very pleased that you're in existence. Obviously, you're Scotland based. Do you think this has implications beyond Scotland as well?
Yeah, so obviously our work's funded by the Scottish Government because they really are investing in climate, health and nature, but also the rest of the UK and much wider have exactly the same remits. Again, it depends on the type of agriculture that you have in your country to how much benefit you could get from these farming systems. But, I've worked in Malawi and in Zimbabwe. I'm just about to start a project in Ethiopia. In all of these countries, they're interested in their traditional foods because they see their farming systems moving away to huge monocrop growing, which doesn't really benefit the people or the planet. So there's interest globally and we're involved in a lot of those global projects. So yeah, although I'm talking today with Freda about a Scottish-based project, it has huge implications across the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to kind of round it up, not to be flippant, but I mean, obviously it's not going to stop at sorrel, is it? Are you going to do further projects with further wild edibles? Or again, is that something that's going to get legs once this project's over? People might say, okay, right, well, I'm now going to investigate wild edibles off my own back. Or do you have a list that you'd like to see more experimentation done with?
So I'm so glad you asked that question because sorrel is just a way of communicating and getting the public involved and thinking about these concepts. Our project is investigating almost all of the wild foods that could be grown in Scotland. We ran the National Foraging Survey back in 2022. It was fantastic. We had over 500 people responded. I think we analysed over 300 complete sets of data. We asked them what they foraged for, why they foraged, what they did with it, really to try and understand the current need of forage crops in Scotland. That's helped inform us on what possible products we could investigate. And Freda has been collecting as many of those species as she can. And she's been building a database with all the nutrient and phytochemical content. So when people want to investigate what products are out there, or businesses want to look at, perhaps I'd like a high vitamin C component in my bread, these type of questions, we will have that capability to inform people. Freda, you might want to say a bit more about that side of the project.
Yeah, sure. So yes, I've been trying to forage for wild edibles that are in season since last year. So I've collected between 50 and 60 separate wild edibles, and also around 13 mushroom species with the help of a colleague and her family. And I'm in the process of having all those analysed for a wide range of nutritional parameters such as protein, fibre, and phytochemicals, vitamins, with the help of our analytical department here. So it's going to be a really valuable resource, hopefully, like Wendy says, once it is up and running and populated, so that people who are interested to use wild edibles, they can actually have a look at this to see what's rich in which vitamin or which element, and then they can hopefully be more likely to actually use some wild edibles, because it's all about knowledge. And I started off this project with almost no knowledge on any wild edibles, and I really do find that once you have that knowledge about which wild edibles are out there, what's safe to eat, what their nutritional value is. And I think it's really super. And knowledge, I think, is so important for this to actually move forward, I think. If anyone is interested to join our Wild Edibles project, you can look on the Rowett website, which is part of the University of Aberdeen, and go onto the research tab, and you'll find on the left-hand side there's a Wild Edibles section where you can click on, and then you can input your information as to your name and address, and we'll send you out some sorrel seeds. Or you can also send us an email maybe to wildedibles@abdn.ac.uk.
Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the deep dive into the world of wild edibles and the potential of underutilised landscapes. If this episode sparked your curiosity, you might also enjoy episode 155 Wild Food with Marlo Renton and episode 349 Foraging Feast with Flavour Fred. You'll find links to both in the show notes, and as always, thank you for listening. Next up is Benny with his Insect of the Week, but first, a word from this episode's sponsor, Cerddwr's Herbs, a small Welsh Celtic herbal business creating sustainably sourced dried herbs and botanical blends, designed to help you feel more grounded and connected with the plant world.
To the healers, dreamers, and keepers of the old ways, listening to Bud of the Week. Hello from the heart of Wales. Here at Cerddwr's Herbs, we carefully craft our herbal blends and pouches. Every herb is sourced in the UK, then handcrafted into 100% natural products, wrapped in fully recyclable and biodegradable packaging. We care for the planet as it cares for us. Inspired by an ancient wisdom for the wanderers and dreamers of today, we invite you to slow down and sit with our Pacifica blend and connect with a simpler, more enchanted way of living. Begin your journey at Cerddwr's Herbs and use the code BUDPODS for a special discount at checkout.
If you can, do check out their website and support them. I placed my order last week and can recommend the Green Man blend. Now here's Benny.
Ambliteles armatorius. My insect of the week this week is so cool that it doesn't even have a common name. Ambliteles armatorius is an ichneumoniid wasp. Ichneumoniid wasps are absolutely amazing. One of my favourite groups, so I've been saving this one for a few weeks. In the UK, we've got 2,500 species approximately, perhaps more, maybe some undiscovered at this point, of ichneumoniid wasp. That means it's around 10% of the entire British fauna, insect fauna. We have about 9,000 species of wasp in the UK, so 2,500 of those are ichneumonids. Ichneumonids are known as parasitoids. So parasitoids are not parasites. Parasitoids kill their host. Parasites live off their host. That's a really interesting distinction that I learned some years ago. Oides is something like similar or like in Greek. So it's parasitoides is like a parasite, but parasitoids kill their host. So the ichneumoniid female, the adult female, doesn't necessarily kill the definitely doesn't kill the target species. She will inject her ovipositor into caterpillars' larvae, and their young will develop inside the host, and that will kill the host species. So really, really fascinating group. And we talk about biodiversity, and we talk about numbers. This is a huge group, and some of them are very specific on what they have evolved to, parasitize and kill. So if we don't have the necessary herbivorous insects, say the larvae of the butterflies or the moths, then we won't have the species that kill them, in essence. So if you've got a really healthy abundance of a certain species of butterfly or moth, then you may well have a nice healthy population of the parasitoids. And these wonderful ichneumoniid wasps are a really important group. Now, in terms of spotting them, this one is really, really cool in that it's the reason why I chose it is one of the most identifiable ichneumoniid wasps there is. And so the Natural History Museum put out this guide some years ago, and it was one of the first ones I learned. On the back of the thorax, which is the upper section behind the head of the insect, there's a spine, a rear-facing spine on the propodium. So the propodium is the back of the thorax. So basically the back of the front section behind the head has got a spine. So if you see that spine, if you get a kind of side-facing photograph of the side of this ichneumoniid wasp, you can confirm the species, which is really nice. I've got more than 10 records of this wasp over the last kind of 10 years in different sites. And I've also recorded it in the winter, which is really interesting for gardeners, as what kind of, in a good and a bad way, that I've actually disturbed them because they kind of nestle themselves underneath leaf litter or just underneath the rosette of a plant. So I've done it multiple times now, 2 or 3 times probably in 10 years, but I've been able to kind of nestle it back straight in or put it somewhere very close by. So I didn't feel like I disrupted its life cycle or hurt it or injured it, but it was a great way to see it just by gently gardening with a hand fork through a border. So it's a kind of black and yellow species. If you look it up online, Amblitelis armatorius is really cool. And one of the only identifiable ichneumoniid wasps from basic photographs, really. A lot of them need high-level microscopy, and there's a very small number of experts in the UK who can identify all of them. I'm certainly not one of them, but I am building up my very small list of the ones that I'm familiar with now and can identify. But yeah, if you see this really cool species, keep your eyes peeled. Black and yellow ichneumoniid wasp with a spine on the back of the propodium. Please do tag me in, and please do record it if you see it.
You can download or listen to the podcast direct from the website rootsandall.co.uk. Please also check out my Patreon, where you can make a one-off donation or take out a monthly subscription to help support the podcast. Because if you enjoy the show, please help it continue. I also have a GoFundMe where you can make a one-off donation. Even a one-off donation of £1 helps, and I'll be really grateful for your support. So please go to Patreon or GoFundMe and search for Roots and All Podcast.